Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I'm joined by a special guest. Well, everyone's a special guest, but this one's especially special. If you've been a long-time listener of the podcast and you've seen the growth of this podcast, you've also seen some of my early guests, the people that have been my day ones, the ones that rocked with me forever, and that's, crazy. And so I'm just really excited to have Jermaine on the podcast. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name's Jermaine. I'm not team tatted, but I am team DMV. Just being funny. But, yeah. So, I'm outside. I'm here. It's a pandemic, but it's really a bandemic. And I'm glad to be back on Positive Philter.
So, first of all, you said bandemic. Okay, I love it. So, for the listeners that don't know, Jermaine, you said DMV. You're one of my fraternity brothers and all that. For those that don't know, give them a little elevator pitch of who you are, what you're doing, in life. Also, you have a podcast. Please shout that out, and then we'll just get right into it.
Sounds good. So a little bit about me. I went to George Mason for 4 years. I'm Alexandrian, born and raised. I went to George Mason for 4 years, graduated, went into, engineering, Northrop Grumman. I started out in test engineering, then I did project management. Now I'm like a software developer, so wearing lots of hats, but always trying to stay on my toes and try new stuff. I was on the pregame podcast, which is something I had with my college friends, just, talking about pop culture and college life, which really impacted a lot of people positively, gave them a lot of laughs while we were in school. When I left, I started getting into investing, and I transitioned into creating a podcast about, financial well-being and just overall bossing up in life called Hustle Class. I still am going strong. I'm on episode, I think I have 51 episodes now. Consistency is everything, as, Phil can attest to when it comes to podcasting and building a podcasting brand. And so I've just been executing at a high level. And that's a little bit about myself. I'm also a grad school student at Johns Hopkins getting a systems engineering master's, because automation and systems is what you use to make things simpler and to win in life. Because if everything you're working on is operating itself, automated, you can focus on the things that really matter in life, like being on the Positive Philter podcast.
Sheesh, that was quite the introduction, and I just love it because you are living in the pandemic. And so, honestly, we call this a series. We were going to call this College Days Swiftly Pass. Mm-hmm. You have just recently, I still think that your days of being out of college, you're still 1 foot out of the door. You still can see the hallways, as opposed to me. That's way far in the rearview mirror. So for those, when did you realize, because I know this right now, when did you realize that you are in the real world? You are no longer a undergrad college student, you are grown up. You are actually adult. You're adulting.
Yeah, well, thank you. I actually started realizing that I would be adulting when, there's a cycle that exists. So let me start with this. So how kids are in school, right, in college, and they're like, man, I hate it here. I can't wait to go home over the break. And then they get home over the break and they're like, man, I hate it at home. I just can't wait to get back. That same cycle happened when I was interning, right? Because I started interning for my job before I graduated. So I'm like, man, I can't wait to get this money over the summer and experience. And I go over the summer I work and I'm like, man, 9 to 5 is, let me get back to college life, right? And then you get back to college, you're like, man, I want to make that money though. And so I was in that cycle, but then I realized, wow, once I graduate, that cycle ends. Now I just work. No more summer vacations. No more, vibes. So then I kind of realized that a little early. And then once I started actually working, growing pains. So missing, still being a nocturnal being, as all college students are, but having to wake up early for work and be there all day with no midday naps like we can take when you're in school and you just have classes and blocks. And you can set up your work schedule around your classes and around when you want to take your naps or go to the gym or whatever you want to do. You know, a lot of changes happened, so there were some growing pains there. And then, you know, I guess the realization on, oh yeah, I'm really washed, or yeah, I'm really out of there, is when everybody on campus who's there doesn't know you. You know, it's like I'm still an alpha, so I still, you know, support the younger brothers, but nobody there knows me. You know.
Okay, I'm about to laugh a lot because I experienced that, even that feeling of like no one knows me. Like I didn't need to graduate. So, you know, just going back to my story, and I just laughed because I felt that, is that like I was a fifth year. So I transferred to JMU and I had an extra year. And so when my wife graduated like on time, like everyone else in 2007, I literally experienced that because I was there from 2007 to 2008 at JMU. And like even in the hallways, I was like, yo, none of my people's here. Everyone I was cool with graduated. And then there are the younger people, like the sophomores, like, but I would go to a party or something on campus and I'd be like, yo, I really don't feel like I belong here with these young people. And it was like, they weren't really like that young. They were only like freshmen or sophomores. And I just felt old. So that feeling, I can understand that. So when you're saying that cycle, which you're right, like as you grow up, I think I'm still in that cycle because when you work in higher ed, you know, you got the semesters really intense for even me as a work person, and then the summer's dead. But I'm realizing for different industries, there is no summer break. You know, there is no downtime. So take us through, particularly, you know, the first couple years, even the pandemic or not, that cycle of like no real break.
Yeah, so you know, it started. I had a very, very fun summer after I graduated, because I knew I was gonna start work in July. So from May to July, I just had a blast. So much that I started just swiping my credit card because I had no cash left. Right, just having a great time, traveling and everything. And then, you know, once I got to work, it was like, you know, it started out all right because I'm used to working those 3 months over the summer. So I would say that, you know, July to say October was okay. And then once October hit, it's like, okay, usually end of the year is kind of busy for companies because they want to make sure everything's done in lieu of the new, you know, fiscal year and all that type of stuff. So, you know, things started ramping up towards the end, but we do have like shutdown period, which is basically like our winter break, which is, you know, from like, you don't work from like Christmas to New Year's. So whatever, you know, the last weekdays before Christmas till like the first weekday after New Year's, that's kind of like our gap. So then I go back to work, and then it's just kind of like, it's okay because now I'm in a stage where like, you know, as an engineer, you're getting work. I'm an engineer, but also working with the government. You know, government takes their time when they're doing work because they need to make sure that their work is like really, really good and really, really solid and stable. A lot of people say it's boring because it gets monotonous because they want things to kind of be very consistent and very specific. So government, you know, things, I wasn't kind of getting too much of a workload. So I was making friends at work, which was cool, and I was in that cycle. I was away from Virginia. I was in Maryland, so that was something I had to deal with. But, you know, and then I started traveling a lot with my friends, you know, traveling because now I had money because I'm working full time. So now I started traveling to like New York and, you know, Miami and different places like that just to, you know, see the world. And then that was cool. And then literally, I mean, like I was only working for maybe 4 or 5 months, and then the pandemic hit. So then the pandemic hits and nobody knows what to do, right? Even from a corporate standpoint, nobody really knew what to do. So they're like, okay, everybody stay home. And it's like, oh, break again, right? That's how you kind of think about it. But no, because you have to be working, right? So, you know, then it's the whole work from home structure. And a lot of these companies have had people coming in, so they don't really know how to set that up. But yeah, basically, then I just start working from home. And working from home for me is cool because honestly, since I still had that nocturnal being in me, like I got a lot of work done late at night. So it helped to not have to go in because my schedule could kind of revolve around my own practices. So I knew I'm productive around 9 p.m. So like around 2 p.m., if I don't have a meeting or anything, I'm kind of just chilling because I know that at 9 p.m. I'm going to get a lot of my work done. And that's just how I operate. That might not necessarily work for, you know, everybody else, you know what I'm saying? Especially people who have like been in the work culture for like 30 years and like, I have to work from home now. What do I do? But it's like, I mean, at this point in the game, most of my work life has been from home. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that you're doing like you're used to this because you were doing assignments. So I mean, that's a great question. That sparked another question is, but that how did you transitioning? And this is probably what I want to actually get that college days switching class because like you came into the workforce during a pandemic. So this might be all in regards to work, right?
mm-hmm.
So talk about that adjustment from an outsider point, not outsider point of view, but like, did you like notice generationally, and like you don't have to, obviously not gonna say names or put people under the bus, but did you notice generationally, like when you had to pivot to like this online work, the younger people that are on your team were like, okay, and then the older people are like, oh my God, how to use this Zoom? Because I'm gonna say transparently, like, I don't know, like even me being in the middle, I think I felt like I was made for this. And when I say that, not the kids part, like, no, that joint was trash. I didn't want to work from home with kids. But like, pivoting to like Zoom and all this, I was like, I knew how to do this. I was jumping on my phone, doing Zoom. Like I was adapt, whatever the word is. I was like, what is it, like Bane? Like you was, you lived in the darkness. I was born in the darkness. Like I was born with a phone. I was born with the internet. I knew how to use social media and all this stuff. So can you talk to that? Did you observe that struggle between the generations at work?
Yeah, I absolutely saw that happen. I mean, and to be quite frank, a lot of people like me, when we started our work lives and we saw that, well, like we're saying, things are a little slow and we didn't have to be in all the time, then we were kind of like, okay, why are we in all the time? A lot of us were wondering that because we're literally sitting on the clock and it's like, Bill might come and walk to my desk, like an older like guy, maybe 40, and he'll sit there and talk to me for 30 minutes. But like we're on the clock. And it's like, but you've been working here for 20 years, but like this is what you do. So it's kind of like, and then you're sitting down and you're walking by the aisles and somebody's on YouTube and they're having conversations in the coffee room and it's just like, but then you realize like everybody is getting their work done at a very efficient level too. But it's just like a lot of time. It made us realize that all the time we spend at work is not really all the time that's needed to do the work. Some words for you, right? So in, I think it was the 70s, Nixon had taken the dollar off of the gold standard. So then the dollar is now, run by like the Federal Reserve and like they print out how they need to based on our state as a country. If we really need money, they're going to be able to do that for us to support us. When that happened, right, we had all these dollars, right? And basically, since then, technology has advanced so much that our productivity has gone high. But because inflation has also been going at a higher level, our salaries have been kept at like similar levels and our work hours, even though the technology is at an all-time high. For example, you can execute so highly on Zoom and meeting with people. Like you don't have to travel to somewhere in Virginia to meet with somebody to get something done. You guys can do it like that. But they're still going to want you to work a 40-hour week as if you still have to do what you had to do 40 years ago to get something done. So a lot of people are stuck in that cycle. But for the younger people, we're always questioning, like, why is this the status quo? So we were already kind of like, can we have flexible work arrangements? Can we come in only when we need to? Because sometimes we can just do our training at home. We don't have to get dressed, drive to work, sit down to train all day when we could just, because it's virtual anyway. So can we just take our laptops and do it? So we were already having these conversations when we first got to work, and then a pandemic hits, and exactly what we were looking for, we got. But then the older people, like, I can't see my coworkers, like their lives kind of already revolve around their coworkers, because it's like, you left high school to go to your college town. You made friends there. You left your college town to go to your job. You made friends there. But for us with social media, we're always connected to people we've always known. I'm still connected to people from elementary school, high school, whatever you may have it, college, where some people, like, a lot of their friends are in their workplaces that they've been working at, rightfully so, for like 20 years, 15 years. But I just got there. So sure, I've made friends, but most of my friends are at home. So I don't need to come to work to socialize. I kind of get all that social energy virtually from my friends. So a lot of them were like, not only the social aspect, like, crap, I can't see any of my friends. I'm at home by myself. I have my kids, my family, my wife, but like, I can't see my friends. I can't see the people I've seen every day for 10 years. And I can't have those conversations in the coffee room or by this desk or at the lunch table with other people. and I'm off my cycle because I've gotten in a groove over the course of time. Like I wake up, I brush my teeth, I go to work, I do this, and I have to change it. So there's a whole lot of changes they had to have. There's a whole lot of changes that we wanted that we could just implement because things worked in our favor for what we had already wanted. We already wanted more flexible work environments. We already wanted like Fridays off, stuff like that. There's things that we already wanted as young people, and we kind of got it by virtue of a pandemic, unfortunately, but fortunately. And then people who've always been in this cycle had to switch, and we're adept as well as younger people. We're more adept than somebody who's 50 or whatever. So what did we notice about a lot of older people? They started retiring. The Great Resignation is a lot of older people rather than younger people, in my opinion.
So you spoke to it, and so I was nodding my head, I was listening, but I was also like looking at the soundboard that I'm doing. But you spoke to it because this is kind of the future of work discussion, and this is where it pivot. And like that J. Cole song, like I'm the middle child. Like I'm not like the old heads, but I ain't like you. I ain't young, so I see both. And so what I'm hearing is like, okay, that wasted time, water cooler talk. For me, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can understand the young person's point of view that is wasteful. But then I can understand like, how many times did I randomly have a meeting, like just talking to someone, like, idea. That small talk led to a collaboration. Particularly for me, being an extrovert, I'll be walking around campus and someone will say, good to see you, Phil. I'll hit you up later. And it was because of that random happenstance so you need that environment to have the randomness. You don't get randomness on Zoom. You have to schedule a meeting. So I understand both. Like I understand like, I definitely, I'm like in this hybrid mode. Like I need days to be at home where I can like crank out 10 times more than I can do in a 2-hour block, just knock it out, no distractions. But I'm also like, I need that extroversion, that social connection, that in-person thing. So I love what you said there. And I think the only caveat is like, I think that the hybrid model works too. Like we still need that in-person engagement, very thoughtful, and when it's essential. Like it was almost those times that little meme, like this email or this meeting could have been an email. Like let's really decide, is this a real in-person meeting? We need that engagement, or like, no, we could have cranked this out on a Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And then I think something else you said that was really interesting was about the landscape of the dollar part, right? Like you're right. Like we're doing so much work. I remember that there was this sense of being micromanaged. Like, are they really going to work that hard from home? Are people really going to be trustworthy? Do we need to have ways to keep an eye on them? And ideally, if people really care about their job or they're engaged, they worked actually harder at home and they were burning the hell out. And so I was realizing that people are working harder, but like you said, it hasn't caught up. Certain industries are not paying people more and they're burning themselves out. And so I think that is a great discussion in regards to the greater economics, is that salaries need to increase to match this productivity and workload. And I think the last thing I wanted to touch upon, and I want to get, it's your input, is that you're totally correct. I think this Great Resignation is overused. I feel like, and I talked about this on another podcast, I feel like it's a combination of resignation/migration. Now, the resignation is exactly what you just talked about. Like, I was about to retire in 2 years. I ain't doing this no more. I'm done. I'm retiring early. That's resignation. Migration is more like, I'm not vibing with this. This company it's not flexible enough. I have enough skills, and people are moving way faster. Like you should see how much in higher ed I get like an email, at least bi-weekly, that says, congratulations, someone is leaving and going to Capital One. Like people leaving whole industries because they're like, this one I could get paid more, or this one I got the technology savvy, I can do this. So I think it's a combination. I think we need to call it the Great Migration/Resignation and hit those two pockets. But I don't know. What do you think when all those things? I just threw a lot of thoughts at you.
Yeah. Well, the one thing about the salaries, before I talk about the migration, resignation is, like I feel like as technology has advanced, our work structures haven't advanced. Neither have our salaries comparatively, because now, like I said, we have laptops. Like from an engineering standpoint, you had to literally sit down and draw stuff that you were going to create. You had to literally create that by hand. Now, if you know how to operate a robot, the robot can do it for you. If you know how to use computer aided drawing, you can use a drawing that somebody else has saved from 2010 and make modifications to it so that it matches your modern day specs. No longer does it take you 1 month to do it. Now you can do it in a week, in a day. So with that being said, it's kind of like the landscape has to change on compensation and time. I feel like it should be a combination of, I feel like if they're not going to raise salaries tremendously, they need to reduce work hours. So the whole concept of a 40-hour week, I feel like would have to change to maybe like a 30-hour week, maybe 35 to be a little less dramatic at once. And then pay people the same, even though they're now working 35-hour weeks. Why? Because our productivity has increased highly as a country, as a world, like as a globe. Like, you don't have to take a ship to go to Ghana. You don't have to, walk to work. Like, technology is like that. We get things done so fast, but it's like we're still working 40-hour weeks. Like, it's not the Great Depression right now. Why are we still doing these sort of things? So, the same way, like now they're like pension. Why don't we just let people have a 401k because they put into it themselves? They kind of invest in themselves and then we can match it. So we're investing with them. It's like, you see the world is changing around us, but certain things it's like, okay, if everything's changing, why are these things staying the same? So I feel like that's something that should be looked at, should be checked on. So an increase in salary, but if people don't feel like they don't want to pay people more, well, you can reduce people's hours because they're still going to get the work done. Like you were saying, it's like, are people going to get their work done? Are people going to make sure they're actually doing their job? Like if you have in agile work environments, because now I work in an agile environment, you're giving updates on a regular basis. You're, the agile environment is what is actually micromanaging you. You're not being micromanaged by a person, but you're being micromanaged by an environment or a process where it's like, every day you do your work, you have to give deliverables on what you did. So it's kind of like, okay, this is the greater goal for the next 2 weeks. This is what I need to accomplish. Day 1, this is what I accomplished. Day 2, this is what I did. Day 3, this is what I did towards that goal. So you kind of have like a big goal and like little benchmarks to hit that you just hit on a daily basis. But by the end of the 2 weeks, your task is going to be completed. And it's however you can get it done within that time frame. So it's kind of like, I'm trying to think of how to describe it.
So is it like when something's gamified? Like, do you see the percentage, how you get closer, and like you kind of like. Okay, so I know. Okay, one of my homeboys, he works for Amazon, and they make him like open a special browser, and then with that special browser, they can see what he's doing, and then time it and say you took whatever, or certain places. But just can you explain? Because I heard that word Agile a lot. What does that even mean? Like, what does that mean?
So a lot of so there's like waterfall processes and agile processes. So a waterfall process is basically like, okay, Phil, like let's say you have to like get 10 people to apply and enroll at George Mason, right? Let's say that's your goal for like the month. You have to get 10 people to be at George Mason. Waterfall is like, okay, go, and then we'll like ask you if you're doing your work, or we'll like kind of see if you're doing your work, but that's what you have to do. By the end of the month, we're going to see if you accomplish your goal or not. And agile, that's a waterfall environment, right? An agile environment is more or less, okay, you have, this is your goal, right? You have to get 10 people, right? This is what you're going to have to do on a week by week, maybe even day by day basis to get to that goal. So every day we're going to just be leaning on you to let us know your progress on reaching these. It's kind of like breaking things down at a smaller level so that they're more easily achievable from a small sense, giving more direction to what the greater goal is, as opposed to just saying, this is what you have to do, figure it out. It's kind of like, this is what you have to do. How can we figure this out in a way where we know you're going to reach your goal by that date? It's not like, oh, like towards the end of the month, you're like, yeah, actually, I didn't know how to do this and that. And, you kind of figure out all that stuff early because of the process that exists where we're checking things as we go along. So that's like the difference in that process. It's hard to understand. I'm trying to think of an analogy, but I don't think one is coming to me right now.
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing is it sounds very gamified, one, and it seems like it's very benchmark. The word benchmark comes to my mind, but you have to present your own benchmarks. I mean, not present it, but like you have to like report on it. And like, it's not like, I love your idea where it was like, because I work on, even at Mason, I think there's large projects, but it's almost like no one is going to be like, did you get the project done until the end? and say, did you email this person? Did you do this? Did you do this? You kind of have to like set that yourself. But I feel like this program or this methodology is more like, my boss tells me this, but I got to say, okay, I got to plan a large networking event. Day 1, I emailed 10 employers. Day 2, I booked the room. Like I have to like tell them what I'm doing each day till the event is done.
Yeah, and then so you're gonna hit your 100%, and they're gonna kind of see everything as you're going, like the bumps along the way and everything that happens, and so it's kind of like there's no that it removes the whole like, is he doing his job? Agile changes that, because now we've set the goal. You've set what it's going to take for you to reach there from that plan, and then we're just going and abiding by that. So now it's like, if you can get your day one's worth of work done, no longer is it a concern about how long you're working, because the tasks are getting done. That's where you kind of lose a lot of the newer generation, because with attention spans like this and social media and all that stuff, it's kind of like people don't like their time to be wasted. So it's like, if this thing can get done in an hour, why am I sitting here for 9 hours, for 7 extra hours with nothing else to do? Because that's how things exist. Well, what if I'm on a team where this is what I need to do. I have a month to do it. Space it out in the way you see fit so this task can get done by when we need it done by. So the task is done, because is it really about how many hours I'm working, or about the work that I need to do getting done? That's what the younger people think.
All right, so I want to know, like, in regards to this, like, first of all, you do a lot of research. I love listening to the Hustle podcast and the Money and the Dollar. I listen to all your episodes. Like, who is, like, like the man, like, who determines this? Like, I'm not an economist, but who determines, like, okay, let's think about, and you probably do some research, and if you say I don't know, so I'm curious, but like, who determines that, I get paid, $50,000, and this person that knows IT gets paid $70,000? Like, who's really thought of this and said, like, we're gonna pay people this? Do you know that?
Yeah, the answer is simply, because I did project management, so I've seen a lot of procurement and a lot of government contracts and stuff like that. And then when it comes down to that, it's basically, for every contract that is given, there's a budget kind of allocated, and that budget is going to be split by what the company or whatever deems fit, like their workforce is. So when you look at a lot of these companies, like say, for example, Amazon, right? What Amazon actually is a company that is a contractor that will get like a government contract or a contract from like, another country or another company, and then they'll hire people to kind of like subcontract too. You know what I'm saying? For example, like maybe at your job, like let's say George Mason himself can't actually do everything. So he's like, okay, but I have a name and a track record where the government's going to give me this business, and I'll just hire him in my workforce. And then when they give me the contract, I'll know what I can assign him to do. When they give companies that contract, they already have their numbers on what they can pay people, like what they value. They have their own metrics where it's like, okay, this skill is worth this much, or this and that is worth this much. And the contract, let's say if we get $1 million contract and they said they need IT work, okay, we can probably get it done in 5 months if we have a team of 20, but if we have a team of 5, it's going to take us 20 months. It's just kind of like, so they do all that calculation. They tell themselves, okay, we're going to need 10 IT engineers. We're going to pay them $100K each, so that because it's actually a $2 million contract, and we can pay them $100K each. They'll get it done by the time we need it done by. We'll pay them their $1 million, and we'll get to keep $1 million off the top, so that our shareholders are happy. So we're doing good business. So it's all contractually based. So these guys are getting paid a lot because the contracts that they're getting paid are worth a lot, and their skills supersede how many men they'll need on the ground doing the work. Like I said, technology is enhancing. So if you already have the code there and it's like, oh, I just have to make modifications to it, I don't have to write it from scratch to make something work. Oh, you just saved yourself needing to hire 2 or 3 extra people. And now you can funnel that extra money maybe into me individually, but still cut a little off the top so you can make your profit. It's very intricate and it's very hard to understand, but it's basically like the contracts that are given.
So what I'm hearing, and this is always what I'm thinking too, is like, okay, so they see a big money budget and large organizations are large systems. This totally went way left on a college day swiftly passed. This turned into a money podcast, which I love. And they know they do calculations. They realize how much they're bringing in, how much money they're bringing in, and then they forecast based on skills what they can pay people, and they probably have like a status like how much does it cost to live here, all this stuff, and then they break it down and say, you know what has more value to us as an organization, we'll make that. So what I'm seeing though is that sometimes people are undervalued, or their skills are like, oh, it's not really a tangible hard skill, that's not a computer skill. So a lot of people that are not in the STEM field are getting, not say slighted, but like, I'm an educator. So like maybe they're like, oh, you know what? This guy talks to people. We don't need that as much as we need for this company. We need the person that can run a code. And so they're making a value assessment on skills. And I don't know. I think I kind of agree with you, like in the sense that some of the skills that are really good about people and all that still don't work in that calculation. Like for instance, like an educator, someone that teaches people. They're leading the next generation. It's very highly, I believe, highly skilled, highly worked. But because it doesn't have like a really direct, tangible, computer-ish skill, they don't get paid. So like a teacher doesn't get paid. But if someone knows Java, HTML, and coding, and they can do their job by themselves, they get paid way more. So how does it, like, what do you think about these calculations of like what people should be worth?
Yeah, I feel like also it's kind of like it's kind of based loosely on industry. So it's kind of like if, like the other day, Amazon said they're raising their base pay, I think, to like $350K from like $160K, right? They like doubled it, right? And when they do something like that, now they have a competitive edge in terms of getting people who have a certain skill set. So now Northrop Grumman and like maybe like Google or like Amazon are like whoa, like we have to keep up. You know, it's like they have to keep up with Amazon. So it's like they have to also pay more. But it's like, if, you know, what education the company is saying, okay, we're gonna ramp it up to 100K. It's kind of like none of them are doing that, right? So it's kind of like industry based too, because a lot of times what companies will say when you're looking to negotiate for wages, they're gonna say, hey, we're giving you a competitive offer based on industry standard. So they kind of always mapping it to that too. So not only do they see it like, okay, we need 3 electrical engineers who have this. We need 2 system engineers who have this. We need 1 educator who has this to train everybody, do it like the module for them. And it's like, so they have all of those there, but then it's like, okay, dang, Amazon is going to get all these people if we don't also ramp it up. So they might need to try to get more money from the person who's giving them the contract, say that, hey, our workforce needs a little more money. Would you be willing to renegotiate this contract so we can pay people more? Or they're going to have to dig into their money, which, you know, a lot of companies have a little pocket, especially Apple. They have a big pocket that just waiting if they need to pay people extra, if they need to just buy a company out of nowhere. Same with Microsoft. So some companies have that extra money to like, okay, we'll give you a 20K signing bonus if you sign up here. Because another thing with these companies too, which happens in engineering, I don't know if it happens in education, is like once they hire you, it's kind of like I can use, if Jermaine has 9 hours in a day, I can use 3 of his hours for this contract, 3 of his hours for that contract, 3 of his hours for that contract. Now that happens at like a more high level. So for those people, they might need that 40-hour work week. But for people who are like at a lower end doing less contracts like that, they probably don't need that much, right? But yeah, so that's how sometimes it's given up. So they can like take one person, use them for $3 billion contracts. And, you know, that was just one person. So they pay them all this money, but then they had them doing all this different work. Like, yeah, you have to code this, and then you have to pivot and code this, and you have to pivot and stay with this software or run this test while you're, you know, during overtime. Or like they'll try to like get you to do a lot of different work.
So what I'm hearing, so this is crazy. I think, and you're right. Like I don't think, you know, when you're in a public institution, you know, they're not like, oh man, you know, you work at Mason, we're going to compare you to Tech, we're going to compare you to ODU, other state institutions. I think they're kind of all on the same accord in regards to that. I think because it's a state level thing, there's a standard,
Public.
right? There's a public standard. But I think private institutions could be a little bit different. So there has been known times where private schools can fluctuate because they're their own entity, right? They're not kind of governed by the state. So there's been times where I've heard that private schools have been could push the envelope a little bit more on salaries because they're not held to a standard that is universal across the state. But at the same time, you don't see I really don't see like a university saying, "Oh my gosh, let me keep up with this one." They're like, "You get what this is what we get because it's the area and this is what it is." So, with that being said, and we know that this is really skill based, when you were graduating or going into school and now you're in it, like as a young person, like let's not even talk about the awakening that you had post college. Did you already know in your mindset that like were you taught that like when I go to college I need to have a skill because skills are getting me paid rather than like when I'm here, when I was there I was like explore, love your life in college. Now I would have been like, man, I love people, but man, I wish I would have taught myself some kind of STEM thing. So can you go back? This is you personally. What did you learn going into college?
Man, so for me, I knew I wanted to make money, but it was kind of like, do I want to get into business like accounting? Do I want to go into law? Would I want to do medicine? Would I want to do engineering? And out of all of those, I kind of I got touched on some engineering topics where I was really good at like math. So then I was like, let me just go with engineering like in high school. So I started taking like the little high school like engineering courses that we had. And those were cool, but I was still kind of just like, I'll go to school and I'll be an engineer. Didn't know what engineer, didn't know what skills I would need, just kind of like, I'll do engineering. And then, when it comes to college, they don't ask you what skills you want to gain or what job do you want to have at the end of it, because this is something that everybody should strive to do for their kids and everything. You should reverse engineer, right, your career. So think about where does your kid want to be, and then really, really delicately, what is that path that gets you there? Because a degree in anything is not a good enough answer for the specificity that would be required for the actual job they want to work. For example, if I had wanted to work at Spotify as a software engineer, electrical engineering probably isn't the best path for me. Civil engineering probably isn't the best path to me, but it's still engineer, right? But you have to really, it becomes catered because certain classes have certain skills that you'll gain from them and all of that. When I went into school, I was just purely, I want to be an engineer to get money. It was kind of quite simple. It was a creative field, so I did have creativity. I did like drawing like homes and like little, symmetric shapes and stuff like that. So geometry was kind of cool, like drawing stuff. So I was like, I could do engineering. And then I got into college and I realized, oh snap, every internship wanted somebody who's doing software. I'm doing electrical. And so I struggled to get an internship. And then, I had to basically go to a National Society of Black Engineering conference outside of the state to find a job not too far from my state, which is crazy because I'm not that far from like Maryland, but I had to literally go to Missouri to get a Maryland job. Crazy. But yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult just going willy-nilly. And a lot of people have the issue where it's like, I just want a job that's high paying. I just want this and that. And it's like, you really need to focus on things that you can like doing or things that you can learn or that you can grow to love. So that's another thing.
But I was thinking also, and like you touched upon it, like reverse engineering. I love that word because I use that all the time. But like the skill part. So like, for instance, I know you didn't, and I always try to work on this too with students, like though, but you can't just rely on classes. So like, let's say you wanted to learn coding, right? There's other things you could do, like you do Khan Academy or was it School 3W or LinkedIn Learning. And so you got to do these things outside the classroom. So kind of pulling that back, knowing that now that you started getting the NSBE experience, what were some things outside the classroom that you know that you needed to build skills to get a job?
Yeah, I definitely needed to have projects under my belt. So when you don't have a job, a lot of companies want to know what it is that you can do. So I've been telling people like the wave of the future is like projects and certifications. Like if you can be like a certified this and you have a portfolio of projects where you've done that stuff, that is going to be highly valuable to companies because they need people who can do. Like when they're looking at all these metrics, like, from a high level, they're like, oh, we need this engineer, we need that engineer, right? But when they're making these job descriptions, then they put in all the things that they want you to have, like preferred qualifications, basic qualifications. And sometimes, you don't have the degree, but you have the skills, and there's a way for them to maybe be able to find a role for you that is like lower tier. Maybe you don't get paid as much, but you still have that skill set, and you can move within the company and eventually make a name for yourself.
So when you say projects, outside the classroom projects, is it like making your own app just to for playing around, or I want you to give me some like examples outside the classroom. So for instance, I work with a lot of the media students, the media arts, and so they're like, I want to be a journalist, and similar to what you just said, like you need to have something under your belt. So I tell them, go write for the school paper, or write, or do this, and then have tangible stuff. So what would be some tangible things in a school paper, writing that's outside the classroom? It's not just your journalism 400 class. So what would be some examples of projects outside of class?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and you hit it on the head. You tell people exactly what they need. If you're a basketball player, you got to have your hoop mixtape. If you're a football player, you got to have your huddle. Yeah. It's kind of like it's the same when it comes to this. Like you're a journalist, write those articles for Medium.com, and if you're want to be a social media strategist, reach out to people and ask them if you can run their social media accounts, if you can be a part of their team, if they have like a small podcast or something. Everybody around us is doing something business oriented, right? Somebody who you're into marketing. Somebody whose uncle has a restaurant. Hey, can I market for you guys? Can I make your Google Maps page? These are ways that you can build that portfolio and that job experience without actually having been hired by somebody. Because that portfolio, I feel like that's going to be the wave. Because as we come up, like if like the newer companies that exist, like the Spotifys or the Apples, like certain jobs that they have, they're looking for people who have more experience than they do education. Like, what can you do? Because a lot of those founders and stuff were guys who just kind of tinkered around and were able to do something project-wise. They weren't these, from a rich family and then they just got a business dropped on them and now I run the business. It's like they built things from scratch, just using skills and people who said they could do stuff. And then okay, do it for me then. And they did it. Okay, it's working now. We added it to it. Now we're moving forward. That's like the story of Apple. So I feel like, like little projects for me. I had seen like a laser security alarm online, and so I literally got the equipment I needed, and I like created it, made a little YouTube video talking about laser security alarm, and then I added it to my LinkedIn. So if you go on my LinkedIn, you see the video I made, and it's kind of like, oh wow, he did that. And like when I got my internship, in my interview, they were like, oh, like tell me about that project, right? Now a lot of people, right, who've done like projects just because like it was a part of like coursework or something like that. I don't know how extensively they can explain it when it comes to an interview, but because I literally like did it from scratch, like in the interview, I was like, oh, so I took this and I did this and I did this. So they were looking at me like, oh my goodness, this guy's a science freak. But it was like, I did it. Like I did it. So it's kind of like you being able to speak to that. They're looking at me like, wow, he can articulate to a customer. Wow, he knows what he's doing. He knows that he's using technical jargon, right? Because if you have done the work too, you might be watching YouTube videos and somebody uses certain words you don't know. Somebody might say agile. Somebody might say, certain words. You're like, okay, well, what does that mean? Now you look it up. Now you understand it. Now you use it when you're explaining it. And if you're using the industry jargon when you're trying to get a job with the industry, it's like a win-win. If people who are coders are interviewing me and I'm like, yeah, so I use C++ and I created a class and then I set a pointer, they're going to be like, oh, he knows what he's talking about because I'm using the jargon that they know. Kind of like when you walk up to a brother and you're like, yo, what's up? He's like, oh, okay. This is brother to brother type thing. It's kind of like that medium of communication that we both relate to, and it really helps when it comes to the interview. So get those projects on, people.
First of all, too bad you're not gonna get, you won't get paid. So I'll tell you not to be a career counselor, but you could take my job. But like, that was dope because like I'm thinking about that too. Like I've always, with this podcast, thought about that. Like, what skills have I gotten? I didn't think about it. I was just like, okay, now I learn how to use, Audacity and use this, and like you reverse engineer it, and then now I could present it and like talk about it and nerd out, or I could just dumb it down and just say, I know how to do it. Just trust me. So it hits two pockets. It hits the person like that they want me. And almost like I have an end, like, how deep do you want me to talk about it in the interview? And they're like, oh, just tell us you can do it. Good, I can tell you that. Or they're like, they give you openings like, tell me more. What was your process like? And then you can do both. So, Jermaine, you are a very extroverted, very social, you're just, a handsome young man, all those things. But I don't think a lot of, and maybe this is a stereotype. I mean, this is true. This is a stereotype. I've met a lot of IT people, and they legit can't talk to nobody. So what we gonna tell these dudes, man? We need to, and people, ladies, like, how do we bridge that gap? Because I think that there is a big importance about what we call soft skills, but we're getting away from it. I like this podcast where he's like, they're called strong skills, leadership, communication, all that. Did you know that when you were concurrently getting these IT skills, which you knew you were going to get laser focus, did you say, I also need to build these strong skills? I need to build these life skills while in college. Did you find value in that? Or are you just like, I just also want to just be social? So talk about that.
Yeah, I think that I did think about it from a skill standpoint where I was like, it's always good to be well rounded, but I think it started with the idea and the ideology that people matter most, and so I'm always I'm very people centric, and in that, also like you said, somewhat of a social butterfly, and definitely a handsome young man, if I do say so myself. But yeah, I think that you know. I don't even know how to describe it. I feel like I've always really loved people. So my love for like other people, like my first job at George Mason was working with Office of Diversity and Inclusion and Multicultural Education as a desk assistant. So that's helping people with some of their microaggressions that they're dealing with in life, or pointing them to the right person to talk to, or just being that helping hand where it's like, oh, I'm struggling with the class, like in this office of like helping others. So it's kind of like, my experiences have always led me to work with people in certain capacities where, I was communicating with them like, on a consistent basis or like on a friendly basis. And then, I was trying to get a bag. So then I just kind of like learned the tech stuff. But it was kind of like most of my personal interest was in other people, like being social, like hanging out with people, getting to know people, having fun with people, like people. But then when it came to like, the technical aspect, that was more like just from like a job or like an education standpoint. I think that's what makes me that well-rounded. But I feel like a lot of guys probably, or guys or gals who you meet in those spaces, maybe they're more introverted, and so they're already like, I don't want to talk to anybody. Then they find out coding is something that they can do, and now they just code, and now they're like really good at coding, but maybe they just still don't have those like social skills. Because I feel like social skills are hard to get, harder than most might see, because for a lot of, for me and you, it's like, I mean, we're not embarrassed, we're not shy. It's like these things don't come like to us as naturally as it might to other people, so we just kind of are more expressive. But for some people, those things are like, and maybe it's traumas from the past. Maybe they came up in a household where there wasn't a lot of talking. Maybe they get irritated by people easily, and they like just their own space and their own comfort of, it's a multitude of things. So I don't think there's anything that we could do to like break the ice, because even from a corporate standpoint, people have like these corporate, like Spotify, Twitter, these Snapchat, these highly coding environments do a lot for the employees to make them engage, and people still don't engage. It's kind of like, they're and it's kind of like, I feel like I can say for a fact that, social life does take me away from the technical stuff. But if I was no social life, I was all technical, I feel like I'd be really good to like a Facebook employee level, but I might not have any social skills to go with it, because that's all I do. All I do is code.
So one of the things, but also I'm hearing too, is that so that's soft skills, and that's natural, and it's not natural. But did you particularly think also about leadership? Did you actually say like, I needed to pursue opportunities in college to build my leadership, like leading teams, and speak to, did you actually bring that up? Like, so I know you brought up the laser. You brought up like, I did the laser. Did you bring up like leadership, like in those interviews? Did you actually bring that up? Did they actually care, or they didn't? Because I'm just curious.
You asked such a great question. I honestly don't remember them asking me anything about leadership. And for me, I was just kind of like, I was kind of going with the flow. I'm good at selling myself like, oh, I'm Jermaine, I do all these cool things. Like, and I definitely touched on my leadership experiences, because those are the only experiences I had. Because when I was getting an internship, I had no job. So I was like, yeah, I'm a peer advisor for the School of Engineering, the Engineering LLC, or Living Learning Community. And I touched on that I was working at Office of Diversity. I'd been there for like 2 or 3 years at the time, and I worked the front desk. But I was really good with people with diverse backgrounds and helping them feel included in our campus community. But when it boiled down to it, they asked me more questions of behavioral, like about who I am, like strengths, weaknesses, like tell us about yourself. And then it was more like technical, like, so if I gave you a voltage and a current, how would you da 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 da? Like it got weird, and I was like, oh, but I thought on my feet, and I just kind of answered it to the best of my ability, and I was able to get the job. But a lot of the interviews I had were very, very technical. Yeah, I would say they touch on the behavior just to kind of see who you are, but they really want to know what you can do, because like I said, like, think about it. You get a contract, and the contract says we need this, and this done. And they're like, okay, well, this works for this engineer, this engineer. It's kind of like, okay, it's a numbers game. It's like, you know what I'm saying? When it comes to like leading a team and stuff like that, I'm sure if I was trying to apply to be a manager of a team, I might need to touch on my leadership. But being an employee who's going to work under this big contract, I don't think they really, are you a team player? That's probably it. Can you collaborate?
Okay, so and honestly, I'm not. I think that's also showing that you need to read a job description, because like, I guess they don't care if you was an alpha or not. Like let's be real. Like they don't care. Oh, I'm the district director or whatever. I was the So I guess what we're hearing is know your audience. So maybe in more IT based fields, they could care less if you were the social media chair for your fraternity and all that, and maybe in a different social media space. So in social media, like, when did you do social media? But like, so what we're talking for IT students, and so this is great to know as someone that recently was right there with you, is that one, know your stuff, know the lingo. Two, have projects outside of class, and know those projects out of class, break it down back and front. Like step 1, 2, like you can explain it to someone crazy, and then also just know a little bit of basic, very basic behavioral interview questions, but like you don't need to be like,
know your audience. You said it best.
Know your audience. That's crazy. Crazy.
Know your audience. You said it best. Once you, and that's like the last point. All the points you gave were excellent. And the last point that you also gave was know your audience. And it's just like, yeah, like if you they always say don't bring a knife to a gunfight or something like that. So, you got to know your audience. And if you come in, like, that's why they always say also, like, you should probably tailor your resume to the job you're applying to, because I'm saying certain jobs might look at certain things more than other jobs. So it all falls under the same umbrella.
Well, so we had a great podcast. This is the last part of the show, shot for shot. You know how it is. This is a great episode. I think I'm gonna call this College Days Swiftly Passed, but I'm gonna put it in the description like Jermaine drops gems and could take my job in career services, because you really talked about a lot of things in careers, and I obviously I learned a lot. So, do you want to go first, or I go first and shot for shot?
I always let you go first, so we gotta let Phil go first.
All right. So, and I'm playing around with this thing. I think I'm trying to do like so we don't have no echo, but so like I'm figuring it out. But okay, my question for you is: you just bought a home. You talked about it on the Hustle podcast. Just briefly, I don't think this is a total tangent. I don't even think this is a question. Talk about the process of a young person such as yourself. I think, you're 25, 24, I don't know. I'm just making up your age. You'll tell me later after this question's over. Take us through the process of a young person buying their first home. And when I say take us through the process, tell us why, as a young person, you thought it was better to buy a home than, ball out in an apartment.
Yeah, so I'd moved out of I'd moved out of my parents' home going into college, and then once I left college, I went straight to living in an apartment. And I was paying rent for a while. I started doing my research on real estate, and then I understood interest rates and kind of how you would want your home to have like a low interest rate on the mortgage. So then I knew that if I wanted to get a home, I wasn't going to get an interest rate like the one that exists now for a long time. So I kind of had to bust a quick move. And then I understood that, currently I was renting out a space that was it was like a 1-bedroom. And I was paying, let's say $1,300 maybe $1,400 a month for that, like one bedroom. Because it was in a decent area. It wasn't top tier. If it was top tier, that would have ran me like 2,000 maybe. So it was pretty mid tier. It wasn't in it was in no trouble spots with a lot of crime or anything. And then I was like, okay, like if I'm gonna get this mortgage on a home and it has enough rooms, I could probably rent out one or two of them, and then even though the price of the mortgage might be like 50% or 30% more than my current rent, if I had that roommate, that would cover 50% of my rent or something like that. So I knew that, if I ended up, if I got a place with more rooms and I found people to live in those rooms with me, one, I would have more social interaction. And then two, I would also, and I would also be able to help people out because I wouldn't be, the rent would just be kind of to pay the mortgage. It wouldn't be kind of to like, how rents are, like they're usually like profit driven. But if it's just to cover the mortgage, like that's good, right? We're in good shape. And so I was thinking about all those things and I was like, okay, let me bust a move and get this home. And then I found a guy who was looking to give it for a deal because he had to be restationed somewhere else in the military. And I was like, okay, well, what can you do for me? And then he kind of laid it out like what he would do for me. And I was like, sounds pretty good. I wanted to get it done because, they had ran my credit. They had done everything to see if I qualified for a mortgage. And so once he was good to go, I was green light, ready to go. And then I made the process happen to get it. So that was getting the home in a nutshell. And I wanted to get that because, the cycle of renting, I knew that even though my rent was relatively low compared to the market, that would only keep increasing year over year, month over month. Whereas my mortgage is set in stone for years. And if I hit certain benchmarks, I could probably reduce my mortgage as well. So, I was like, and then I could get that help from other people too. So I was like, it was a no-brainer at that for me. But of course, everything sounds good until you do it. Then you get more information. It's like, okay, maybe I would have made this decision differently or that decision differently. But hindsight is always 20/20.
Yeah. And I'm also blind, so it don't matter. But that's crazy. And, shout out to you. I bought my first home in 2011, and so I can't do math. I was 2011. Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah, it was like 26. No. Golly, I don't know my age, but I wasn't 30, so we were probably the same par. Golly, why is 2011? How old is I in 13? I don't know. That's going to be something that's going to bug me, and everyone's going to make fun of me later when they hear this podcast that I don't know my own age. But I think it's great to do it because now, as we talked earlier before we did this podcast, like that first home is not your forever home. I'm so glad I did it. I bought my first townhouse near Mason. I was in grad school, so I didn't even have a real job yet. I was like, oh, let me figure out my life, and my wife had a real job. So I have no regrets buying a first home. Was it the perfect home? No. Did it break down all the time? No. I mean, did it have issues? Yes. But I have like no regrets, whatever, the tattoo. Yeah. But I think it was great that I did it because one, it built equity. Two, I wasn't throwing my money down the hallway. And then three, I now that I think about it, like I established memories. So having a home, like I felt like I can always check off like I was a homeowner. That like makes you feel good, like ownership, like you own this. That was a good feeling, even when I was young. So, congrats to you. That's awesome. So, what's your question for me?
Man, thank you for the congrats. You always give me the best and most kind words. So my shot for you, I'm gonna take you back a little. So you talked about, the past and like, man, if you were thinking about a bag, you might have done things differently. So I'm wondering if you're looking at where your life is now and you took yourself back, let's say 15, 20 years, what would that put you at? Never mind. But basically, let's go back to let's say you're about to go to college and you have to pick a career. What would you pick? And on that trajectory, where would you see yourself being now? So take us the step by step of what you would have picked, the job you would have gotten, the area you might have moved to or lived in based on that job and all that stuff, and then where you would be now. And if you would be in the same place, cool. But if you wouldn't, let us know.
So, I watched that movie Butterfly Effect, and I now truly believe that everything happens for a reason. So I will start off with the disclaimer that I will not change 1 ounce of my life, good, bad, ugly, because, I wouldn't be here with you. I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't have my beautiful wife. I wouldn't have my kids. I wouldn't live in this house that I live in. So I wouldn't change anything. But if by freak happenstance, I was dropped into another dimension, like that movie, like that show Sliders, which I think you were too young to watch on Fox. But my nerdy friends would know about Sliders. I would still study history. I loved it as a subject. I also switched majors. I started as business, but I still would have studied. I still would have studied history because I loved it. I think I would have started off with history rather than switch into it because I would have came off the ground getting them straight A's rather than struggle a little bit with business classes. But I wholeheartedly believe this. I would have supplemented or added or double majored or minored in some form of journalism, but not journalism to write. I definitely would have learned media, get ahead of the game. Like I really like social media, so that would have been the new wave part. But I would have learned the old school techniques, like getting a real camera. And I do like just tinkering with photos and videos and memories and asking people questions, interviewing people. So that's part of the journalism and documentary making. I love history. I was I would love to make content, make documentaries and explore that creative side with still that history background and at least have the tangible skills. Because let's say I got a history major and I had the minor or major in journalism and I knew how to record stuff, but no one wants documentaries. Well, at least with video production or audio production, I could have gone into radio. I could have worked on television. I could have worked in NBC, ABC. And like I said, I think I would have liked more behind the camera stuff. I don't want to be an actor, but I would love to interview people or record people. I'm doing it. I feel like I'm playing catch up right now. So no regrets. I would have definitely added a media component to my experience, but beyond, like you said, I would have added a skill part of that media. I could have definitely easily, I'm not the best writer, but I don't know why I didn't do the student radio, the school, at JMU, why not do WJMU and push some buttons and learn. I learned a soundboard and learn how to drop tracks and have my own applause and stuff. I definitely was man. And if I didn't go into radio, I still would have been that would have been a good experience to do the radio station at Madison. And that's one of my regrets. I didn't get involved with any media at all. I just turned up, I partied. I did a little bit of, we had a black organization called Bond, Brothers of a New Direction. So I did have that social aspect and one leadership role. I was the secretary or treasurer once. But I would have definitely honed in and yo, you like this stuff. You like radio. And I think I liked it back then. I just would have done something with it. So thank you for making me regret not doing radio early. But as I said earlier, I'm looking at my picture of my wife right now. I'm looking at my in-laws that I live with. I'm looking at this home. I'm looking at this situation with you right now. I have no regrets because if I dropped any pebble in that pond, it would have turned into a tsunami, butterfly effect. I don't know. You watch that movie. So everything happens for a reason. So Jermaine, this is the end of the show. This has been a great episode. I love having you over. You know what it is. It's called shout outs and plugs. Show love to everyone you want to show love to and end this out, and plug everything. Obviously I'll put it in the show notes. So shout outs and plugs.
Yeah, shout out to the brothers of the Iota Alpha chapter. It's by virtue of being a part of that chapter that I was able to, meet Phil, and we have a great bond, and I'm forever grateful. So shout out to those brothers. And then I would also say shout out to Hustle Class Podcast. 51 episodes strong. We're still going. Had to dial it back to one episode a month because there's other stuff in life that I have to focus on, but still giving that free game to those who are willing to take it. And I'm hoping that this year some of the words I give can lead to a revolution in everybody's financial lives. So that's good. And then who else can I shout out, man? I don't know. I feel like shout out to all the listeners of the Positive Filter podcast. Y'all have literally helped me, because your listenership is so strong, the podcast keeps going. You keep motivating Phil to keep going, and then that helps me also listen to his content, digest that. Also helps me to come back on the show because he keeps going. So thank all of the listeners for tuning in ever so readily to, get this positive energy. So that's it.
Well, that's been great. Shout out to you, Jermaine. Shout out to all the listeners. Shout out to the Hustle Podcast. I catch that game too. I definitely don't. I do remember one time, just randomly, that asked you to invest in Apple, and I did. Well, not Apple. I think it was Nintendo or Twitter. Either way, I asked this young man while he was in school to put me on the game to, was it Robinhood? And I did it, and now I'm still broke. I'm just playing with you. I'm just teasing. I did it early, and just like he'll teach you on your podcast, is things to hold and things to let go. I hold on, and now I'm not joking. I have actually made money. So please listen to Jermaine's podcast and listen to all those things and dabble in and diversify. I got some Bitcoin, all that stuff. I be asking him all the time. I seriously do text him. So, holla at him. And I know that you also have a LLC, or I believe you do some consulting. So I'll definitely make sure to put that consulting information in the chat, because this is great. If you want to ask questions, it's always good to ask someone that, is relatable, kind, and will give you that good advice. I do that all the time, and I ask Jermaine in text, and he responds to me. So great. If you like this episode, please share it with a family member or friend. If you want to leave a voicemail for the podcast, it's 571-336-6560. That's 571-336-6560. Sometimes I throw those voicemails that people send on the podcast or on my other podcast, which is Positive Philter Short Takes, very short snippets, which I like to do every now and then. Thank you so much, Jermaine. Thank you, listeners. Please keep being positive, showing love, and we're out. Thank you for listening to Positive Philter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.